Parshas Chayei is often read, like this year, on Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Kislev. Based on what it's known that the parshas of the week are connected to the time in which they are read, it's understood that there are hints in the parsha for the idea of Chodesh Kislev. Now, Chodesh Kislev, one of the unique things about Chodesh Kislev is, of course, the Yom Tov of Chanukah. And therefore, the Rebbe finds a connection between the miracle that happened on Chanukah, the special Yom Tov and miracle of Chanukah, to the parsha of the week. Chanukah, as we know, is established because of the miracle that happened with a jug of oil that only had enough oil for 1 day, and it burnt for 8 days. We find a similar thing in a connection to a pasuk in the parsha where Yitzchak brings Rivka to the tent of his mother Sarah. Chazal tell us that one of the miracles that happened was that her Shabbos candles, the Shabbos candles of Rivka, just as Sarah's, burned from one Friday night to the next. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, it's obvious that there's something unique in the Nes Chanukah much more than in the lamps, the candles of Sarah and Rivka. The Rebbe says the miracle of Chanukah generally is often explained in two different ways. What exactly occurred? What happened? One way of explaining it is that what happened was that there was a miracle in regards to the quantity of oil. In other words, there was enough oil for all 8 days. This itself is explained in two different ways. The Beis Yosef explains either that the jug every single day after filling up the lamps, the jug was miraculously still full. In other words, the quantity of the oil refilled. Or another way of saying it is that every single morning as they came in, every single day as they came in, the lamps that they had filled in and that burned were still full of oil. So this is all regards the quantity of oil that kept on refilling with oil. Another way of understanding the miracle that is regarded in regards to the quality of the oil. In other words, the strength of the oil, the same amount of oil that according to nature should have been enough for burning for only 1 day, and yet that same amount of oil burned for 8 days. So it's not that there was more quantity in the oil, but rather the oil suddenly had a greater strength. And again, so what this means is that every day only 1/8 of the oil was being used up. Not that the whole oil refilled. Again, this can be understood again in two different ways. Either that they originally divided the oil into 8 parts and every single night they just used a little bit of the oil, or they put in all the oil the first night, and then what ended up happening was that the first night only 1/8 burned out, and the second night another little bit burnt out, etc., etc. Now, going back to comparing it to the miracle that happened by Sarah and Rivka, we might say it depends on which way of one of these two ways that we look at it. According to the second way, that it's more about the quality, the potency, the strength of the oil, we might say that it's really the same kind of miracle that happened by Sarah and Rivka. It's just by Sarah and Rivka it lasted for 7 days, and by the Nes Chanukah it was even a little bit stronger, it lasted for 8 days. But generally they're in the same category. If on the other hand we say that it was the quantity of oil that suddenly miraculously increased, then this is something that l'chayra we don't find by Sarah and Rivka. Nevertheless, says the Rebbe, even this kind of miracle, to say that the quantity of the oil is increasing, we also find a previous time in history before the miracle of Chanukah, in the story of Elisha telling the woman that had a little bit of oil, and Elisha tells her to get lots of vessels and keep on filling up the vessels with more and more oil in a miraculous way. So what is it really about Chanukah that stands out, and it's unique, that we don't find anywhere else? So first the Rebbe looks at these two general ways of explaining the miracle of Chanukah, which really, each one of them has a bit of a problem, something that's not so simple with it. If the miracle is that it was in the quantity of the oil that was miraculously increased, the problem is the Torah says we need to be using Shemen Zayis, olive oil, for the menorah. This would seem to be miracle oil, not olive oil. It's increasing in a miraculous way, there's suddenly more oil. On the other hand, if we say the miracle is about the eichos of the quality of the oil, that means it's suddenly a stronger oil. So then the issue is, and we said what happens is that every day only an 1/8 of the oil was being used up. But what's happening then is the first night we have a full lamp of oil, which is the way it's supposed to be. The second night suddenly the lamp has less oil. We're only starting off with 7 times. In other words, 1/8 is missing, so there's only the other 7 parts of oil remaining. remaining. And the sixth day, there's even less oil, and so on and so forth, which really, you're supposed to be putting in the full amount of oil every single day. And therefore, the Rebbe now looks at a third way of the miracle of Hanukkah, and based on this, we'll see what's really unique about this miracle, something that really doesn't have anything similar to it at all anywhere else. And that is, says the Rebbe, that what was happening is that the oil was burning, the full amount of oil we put in and it was burning, and at the very same time, it wasn't being consumed. Something similar to this we could say is like in the story of the sneh, where Moshe Rabbeinu sees the bush burning and it's not being consumed. This is what we call nimna hanimnois. The Eibishter can make these two opposite things happen simultaneously, exactly together. Yes, on the one hand, it's natural oil, and oil, the way it works is it's supposed to be being consumed as it's burning, so it's being consumed seemingly, and at the same time, it's not being burnt up, it's not being consumed. Or like we say by the Orein, Mokim Orein Einem in Amida, it's supposed to have a certain measure, and yet it didn't take up space. Furthermore, the Rebbe says, just like by Mokim Orein Einem in Amida, the only way that worked, that it should be in such a miraculous way, is that that the Orein first had to have the measurements that the Torah says. Otherwise, it wouldn't have the Kedusha. Only once it has the measurements that the Torah says, that's when suddenly it's not taking up any space in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Rebbe says the same thing is in regards to the miracle of Hanukkah. The only way how it's not being consumed is because we're using the oil that's naturally regular olive oil that the Torah says, and that naturally consumes, and that's the way fire burns, that's the way the light's going to come out. And yet, dafka, because of that, together with that, it's not being consumed. The Rebbe now moves on and says, why specifically at Hanukkah did we have such an amazing miracle? In order to understand this, we're going to have another deeper look at the difference between these three ways of the miracle as we explained it. Again, we explained it could be the quantity of the oil increasing. We could say it's the quality of the oil, or this miracle of both things happening together, being burning and not being consumed at the same time. The Rebbe says, if the miracle is regarding the quantity of the oil, that in a miraculous way the oil increased, when does the miracle happen? It's only at the very first moment when the oil is being refilled in a miraculous way. But afterwards, as it's burning like regular natural oil. If we look at the miracle the second way, that it's about the quality of the oil, so now if we're looking at the oil, it's clearly not burning like regular oil, because it's burning at a much slower pace in a miraculous way. So yes, the miracle is noticeable, but when did the miracle happen? The miracle is only one moment. The first second that the oil changed from regular oil into this special higher quality oil. But, says the Rebbe, in the third way, when we're saying that it's burning, and at the same time it's not being consumed, here the miracle is happening. Every single second is a new miracle happening. It has to be burning, the menorah is burning, and the oil seemingly is being consumed and not being consumed at the very, very same time. Now, how does this all connect back to Hanukkah? Well, first, the Rebbe looks in Avodas Hashem. What are these ideas of miracle and of nature and miracle? Teva represents the avodah al pitam v'das, the regular way of serving Hashem with logic, with reason, the normal order of the day. Nes, a miracle, means when we're going beyond our logic, beyond our reason, what we call Kabbalah soil, Mesiras Nefesh. Now, obviously, the way we do our avodah, we always need to start every single day with our Kabbalah soil, remembering our Mesiras Nefesh. This is what we do in Kriya Shema in the beginning of the day. But then the question is the impact of how it goes for the rest of the day. So here we have three levels. The first level is when the Mesiras Nefesh is only during Kriya Shema, only in the morning, even though it of course impacts the rest of the day. But what's mainly noticeable is my regular avodah of Torah and mitzvahs. It's coming based on the inspiration that I had in the beginning of the day of Kabbalah soil and Mesiras Nefesh. That's similar to the first way of looking at the miracle. With the miracle, yes, that first moment the oil increased, but the rest of the time it's like regular oil. A second way in avodah is that the whole day that Mesiras Nefesh is shining. In other words, he's feeling that feeling of Mesiras Nefesh, but it's not that he's actually having Mesiras Nefesh and he's involved in the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh. He's doing regular Torah and mitzvahs, but it's under the influence of that Mesiras Nefesh that he had in the beginning of the day by Kriya Shema. Again, this would be similar to that second way of looking at the miracle, that the quality of the oil now changed. And if you look at it, it's a totally different quality. But again, when did that miracle happen? It's mainly happened in the beginning of the day. And finally, the Rebbe says we have another way, that every single moment a person is standing in that mode of Mesiras Nefesh, the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh, like the third way we explained, that the miracle is happening every single second. These three ways, says the Rebbe, is really three different time periods and three different attitudes, three different levels. When things are going well, when the godliness is shining and everything is going well, or like the avodah of a tzaddik, then it's enough to have Mesiras Nefesh in the beginning of the day, and that will ensure that there's no problems in the rest of the day. You don't have to be standing with Mesiras Nefesh the rest of the day. When there's darkness in the world, when there's golus, this is when you need already moving to the levels of, that's higher than Teva, the levels of Mesiras Nefesh. But here again we have two levels. If it's just the regular concealments of the world, not that the world is standing and causing extra darkness and extra opposition, so then what's enough is the second level that we spoke about. In other words, you feel that koyach of Mesiras Nefesh throughout the day, but you're still serving the Eibishter, and most of the avodah is just the regular Torah and mitzvahs. But when the darkness gets even bigger and there's real opposition, then what's needed is full avodah of Mesiras Nefesh every single moment to fight the darkness, to transform the darkness. And this is the connection to Hanukkah, because this was the time when there was tremendous opposition, where the Greeks got up to try to make the Yidden forget the Torah and forget the mitzvahs. Yidden had to stand up then with Mesiras Nefesh in a revealed way, the weak against the strong and so on and so forth. They had to have the full Mesiras Nefesh, and that's why they achieved also Mulmaila Gili of Elikus that's higher than Ishtalshalos, bringing about these, as we, by the Nes of Hanukkah, this Nimna Nimnois, coming from the essence of Hashem, that can combine these two opposites of the menorah burning, the oil burning, and not being consumed at the very, very same time. The Rebbe says this is also the connection to the other Yom Tov we have in Chodesh Kislev, which is Yutes Kislev. Yutes Kislev is, of course, the time of the Alter Rebbe's release, of the tremendous Hafatza of Chassidus, of Pnimiyas HaTorah, which is also the oil of the Torah, considered the shemen of the Torah, the yechida, the essence of the like the yechida of the neshama in within Torah. And again, here's the same idea. Dafka, because we're holding at the very end of the galus with such a great darkness, we need this tremendous light of Chassidus, which transforms all of the darkness and brings to the geula take it from Yad Mamash.